Welcome back to Mr. Terry's Flip Classroom, US 1. So we recently just stopped with Jefferson's presidency. And the last thing that we talked about up until this point was right here when our country actually started trading with France again, and we began to halt trading with Britain, which is going to lead to them being very, very upset. So we're going to move forward from there and kind of talk what the effects of this trade embargo was, and then also how that's going to shape our country to the modern day. So we're getting into a lot of the stuff that not a lot of people know about U.S. history. For example, our tensions with Britain during the Jeffersonian presidency. So Britain is going to greatly retaliate after we stop trading with them. What are they going to do? They're going to start impressing our ships. Now remember, an impressment is when the British would take over one of our vessels and then force our sailors to sail for Britain. So this is a very big slap in the face to America because this is basically saying that we can't defend ourselves against them. Now, what's going to happen after that? Excuse me. Jefferson is going to bring down the embargo of 1807. Okay, this is how we're going to retaliate against them. That means we stopped trade with foreign countries altogether. No French, no British, no nothing. We thought initially that this is going to greatly hurt Britain because where were they getting all their raw materials from? Exactly, they were getting them from us. They had to buy their tobacco, their cotton, their basic needs came from the American colonies. So, however, the downside to this is Britain is just going to find other markets, as you can see right here. They're going to begin to actually trade with the French sugar islands as well as other areas in Africa that they had already colonized. U.S. is going to be sent into a depression. So this was probably our very first blunder as a country. So remember, the embargo of 1807 was how we had tried to retaliate against Britain's impressments. However, it was a big failed attempt. Now, James Madison is going to be elected after Jefferson. He was elected in 1808. He came into a big old mess. So remember, let's not forget that he had already been put on trial by the Supreme Court for Marbury versus Madison about judicial review. Don't forget, judicial review is when the Supreme Court had to decide whether amendments to the Constitution were actually valid for the Constitution, if they were constitutionally acceptable. So after he loses that entire court case, he actually was going to be elected president. He's not the best one ever. So he actually came in with his first thing was called the Non-Intercourse Act. It's not what it sounds like, I promise. But what it is, it was a protective tariff for the U.S. Now remember, a tariff is a tax on a U.S. imported good. For example, things that are imported that have tariffs on them are alcohol and some cars and things like that. So now this is going to encourage people to buy American-made products. This was believed to be a good idea for our country. However, this was what we were trying to do. We were trying to play Britain and France against each other. We wanted them to compete for American business. So America is going to trade with the first one that takes down trade restrictions with us. So France and Britain had restrictions against trading with the United States. And we told them, we're going to trade with somebody whoever starts bringing down these tariffs and whoever starts bringing down these bad laws that we don't like and stops impressing our boats. Because everyone needed one essential item from us. Cotton grew fantastically in the United States. What's going to happen is France is going to agree to take down their restrictions. Britain is going to be furious. So the War of 1812 is going to break out due to this Non-Intercourse Act. So how long do you think the War of 1812 lasted? Close, just 1 year. The War of 1812 was, of course, Britain versus America. This was considered our second war for independence. Now, the reason why it's going to get caused, though, of course, is the Non-Intercourse Act, like we just talked about, impressments when they were impressing our boats and taking them over, and is also trade restrictions. Now, the big one, though, as well, was Britain supported Native American attacks on U.S. citizens. Under the table, Britain was paying Native Americans to attack Americans. And how did they know that they attacked Americans? They brought them scalps. British officers would give Native Americans money for every colonial scalp that they removed. Now remember, a scalp is when they would actually grab them by the tuft of the hair and cut their hairline off. So it would just be exposed skull right here. So every single scalp of an American that a Native American brought to a British officer, they received money for it. This is a big slap in the face, and this is also going to even as well increase tensions with the Native Americans. We're going to start looking at them very, very subjectively. So, our major figures in the War of 1812 were Andrew Jackson, who was our leader of our American forces. Much like Washington, he's going to build a really big rep for himself. So, Tecumseh was also a major figure as well. Tecumseh was a Native American leader, as you see right here. He was killed by one of Jackson's officers in the middle of a battle. Also, the last one, major, important group right here at the very bottom. Don't forget to write this down, star it, circle it, highlight it, do whatever you got to do. Aggressive Americans that wanted to escalate the war with Britain were called the War Hawks, all right? The War Hawks. So, major battles of this entire, the War of 1812 is going to be when the British invaded Washington, D.C. The British, when they did that, they burned down the White House. This is the lowest point for Americans. It was a really big slap in the face. Francis Scott Key also, during this entire invasion at Fort Baltimore, during this, not during the invasion of Washington, D.C., but at the Battle of Fort Baltimore, Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner during the War of 1812. It was actually to the tune of a popular drinking song as well, ironically enough. Now, the Battle of New Orleans was the last major battle. It was where we got our victory during the War of 1812. American nationalism was enraged after the burning of Washington. Now, if you remember what I told you, anybody remember what was the thing that saved D.C. from being completely burnt down by the British? That's right. A freak tornado actually showed up, put the fire out at the White House, and then threw Britain's cannons at them. The tornado killed more British people than we did. So, now back to the Battle of New Orleans, though. American nationalism was enraged after they burnt down the White House. Now, nationalism is pride for your country. So everybody in the U.S. was very up in arms and wanted to stick it to Britain really bad. American forces are going to push British out, and we will win the War of 1812 at the Battle of New Orleans. Excuse me. Now, the Treaty of Ghent is going to end the War of 1812, and the Hartford Convention is going to be a meeting to discuss states' rights following the war, because this was the first war that we had as a new country. It's very important that you remember that. The death of the Federalist Party is also going to happen at the Hartford Convention. So I know what you're wondering. You're probably saying to yourself, we didn't really go that in depth into the War of 1812. We're starting a project tomorrow where you will actually go a little bit further with it. So I will see y'all tomorrow. And by the way, if you were smart enough to do your homework and watch this video, you're going to know going in tomorrow that there is going to be a short 5-question quiz tomorrow about the Articles of Confederation. I'll see y'all tomorrow.